Legend of Robin Hood. This is small box Avalon Hill game. And these suckers, you know, it seems like Avalon Hill kind of tried to make these on the cheap. Printing on one piece of paper for the rules. Oh my god, how much I want to cut this thing off, staple it together, and make it into a little tiny booklet. Would that help? Not really. There's no way, because it's double-sided to try to work with this. This thing drives me nuts, and any rules in this format always do. I really hate it when Avalon did these. And that's one of the costs, I think, of the small box format, the cheaper box. Cheaper boards. Yeah, nice, huh? And, you know, how much would I rather have had just a paper map? But Avalon Hill doesn't do that. They couldn't get the hard map right. On some games, you had, the early classics, even things later on, you had the fold board that looked like a Monopoly board, and it had this crease running down it, and all the pieces would kind of have trouble right around that crease, right? Especially if you have big stacks. And then they came up with these piece, you know, one-piece fold-up boards that just... I haven't had one that I had no trouble with. Civilizations wasn't bad because the game has big areas and it just doesn't cause much trouble. But when you compare it to, you know, SPI's quality on their paper boards, man, I hated getting Avalon Hill games. I really did, for that one reason. But they did go right with one thing: matte counters. Most Avalon Hill games come with glossy counters, and those suckers wear out so fast. You can't have them in your hands, sweaty palms, whatever. If you play a game a lot and it's an Avalon Hill game, you're going to wear it out. Well, this one won't wear out with the counters, because they took a page from Simonson's book and actually printed on that. I suspect the real reason is they got a cheaper deal printing them on matte counters. But what about the game itself? So this is kind of a weird game because I don't terribly enjoy solitaire. Maybe not that weird. There are a lot of games I don't terribly enjoy solitaire. A lot of the newer games I don't enjoy solitaire for the same kind of reason, kind of this quick, you have very few decisions to make. Well, you have very little to do and a lot of decisions to make in the time to do it. And in this, you're constantly, and I would say the same with Africa Core when I talked about it, you have so much thinking and planning to do, and the actual movement of your pieces is very limited. And that doesn't play well for me solitaire. And usually I'm not too thrilled with it in a face-to-face game. However, this game has always really pleased me in face-to-face. Maybe in part because of the theme, or subject matter, if you will. I'm not sure, you know, how realistic this is, right? If you walk, you know, into a normal gaming group that I'm used to, you could grab a role player or whatever. If you knew the rules to this and could just explain it sitting them down, it's very easy to get them interested in this kind of game. My first girlfriend, who wasn't a gamer before I met her, and probably wasn't after either, that tends to be my way, really, really liked this game a lot. And when I introduce it to other people, especially, you know, these non-gamers or people I've converted, they really do get a kick out of it. There's a lot of flavor in this. On the downside, though, and I mentioned this in some of the playthrough, or one of the playthroughs, is I feel like way too often the game is really decided in those early turns. And you saw it here. I'm not familiar enough with the game to really kind of say figure out how to sit back with the sheriff correctly. Nor do I really have the patience to do that. And I'm not sure it really makes sense. I mean, when you look and you have what looks like decent odds on an attack, it's hard not to make it, right? And even if there is a gamble there, and you might be able to do well. And even with that total blowout situation, I mean, I would have, if I was playing the sheriff player, I would have conceded. And if I was playing Robin Hood, I would have said there's no chance you can win. Even with that, it still came down at the end to, kind of a luck fest, a real decent chance for the sheriff to win the game. Did Robin Hood make a mistake at the end? I'm not sure. What other options do you really have? If he had plowed into John in the village, he might well have lost. He had the numerical superiority, but canceling out Robin Hood's plus on the archery die roll, I don't know. I don't like doing that. And then there was a knight unit in there that could have, that gives extra strength. It just, and he wouldn't have had the leader bonus he was used to. It seemed like what I did was the best that I could do with Robin, and it still came down to only a 1/3 chance of winning, because that man-at-arms could run in and get get Richard if he showed up too early. Chances are John would have attacked once he had all his pieces. Just because my view was, I have no chance at catching Richard. Well, really, I think there was one space where Robin was guaranteed a victory, and 2 spaces where John and the sheriff player were guaranteed a victory, or had a good shot at a victory. So, overall, even with that dominating position that Robin Hood had, it didn't guarantee a win there. Or did it? Well, maybe it did. Because what happens if Richard's captured? Or killed? Does the game end? If the game ends at that point, then I would say Robin Hood wins, because he's got 3 of his 4 victory conditions. Let's see. Ending the game. King Richard is killed or murdered, yeah. So, John could not have killed Richard. He would have had to haul him around. And then he'd still have to defeat Robin. So maybe it wasn't such a lucky ending after all. Anyway, I'm debating my rating here because I've given it an 8 last time I played it. I really, largely because of that new player aspect, but it's hard for me to accept that when you've got rules that aren't great, on a component that makes them really, really obnoxious. Really obnoxious to me. This is a game that I often don't play. So for example, with my wife, we haven't touched this. She's been very interested in playing it, but we wouldn't play it because every time I think about facing this game and its rule book, not that it's got a tremendously long rule book, but I just remember it always giving me a headache, and it's managed it here again, often getting me angry and frustrated, and it was doing that. There's a lot of little bitsy rules in it, that are things you only need to know once, and you end up looking them up and having to face that big sheet of paper to deal with it. Those things make me want to drop it down to a 7, just because, I can't remember ever playing this and not feeling frustrated at the approach. Now, if you played it all the time, or fairly regularly, and I don't think the game warrants that. I know some people really love this game, but yeah. There's almost no game that warrants that for me, right? I mean, Magic did. Awful Green Things. I might play that every few months at the most, and that's enough to really know it. Go, I played very heavily. Bridge, some other card games, but something along these lines. The closest thing that would come to it is Awful Green Things, and if this was as approachable in the rule book, nice little book that you open up, if I could fit it in a pocket, it's just a little too big. I can fit it in my winter coat pocket. Then maybe it would serve a little better. But because, Awful Green Things, one of the advantages was I could take it to a coffee shop. Well, this I could, but it's just a little bit bigger. I don't mind the board size so much, but I do mind that rule book, and I do mind how much space this sucker takes up. If you wanted to pocket it. It's on the large end of what you could bring under those circumstances. Overall, though, it definitely gives you this kind of ability to make a lot of choices and a lot of different kind of figuring out, okay, if I can go here, he can't get to me, and then next turn I can do that. So you can make some kind of longer term strategies here, but they might end up getting foiled. A lot of it's very reactive, which I do kind of like. But there is room for people who like longer term planning, I guess. I don't like so much the number count, the space counting aspect of this game. That reminds me, and that's present in Awful Green Things too, but that reminds me of Africa Core. You've got very few pieces, and you can kind of position them in places, he can't get me here, and just continue running away. Likewise, the Robin Hood player, if he wasn't worried about trying to end the game early enough that I could do the review tonight, could have just walked away and let John have the board, because that one big stack could take out probably enough nobles to keep the sheriff player money down below 5, I think. I don't know. But ending the game is definitely a positive factor. It had stretched on too long to me already with very little happening. And I think that happens a lot of times in this. I think a lot of times one side or the other gets such a dominating position that the other one really has to kind of go into a build-up strength mode or something. And I wouldn't mind that so much with the Robin Hood player. I think I could do it easier there. But it's tougher when you're the sheriff. You feel like you should have that dominating control, right? It shouldn't be the case that you can't go anywhere, including in your castle, because you'll just get attacked. Castles are fairly safe, but still, you couldn't go out in the open, you couldn't go in the woods, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go in villages. Anywhere you went, Robin Hood could kill you in this. That just doesn't feel right to me. It's not the spirit of the story. The spirit of the story is Robin controls the woods and the sheriff controls just about everywhere else. That doesn't follow here. Here, Robin Hood's better off in the fields or on the road, but it doesn't capture the flavor enough, and it doesn't. It's got too many other negatives for me to really leave this with the 8 that I gave it. Now, it sounds like I'm giving it this huge negative review, but for me, 7's a pretty good rating still, and it's still based on the amount of fun I've had playing this game, especially in introducing it to other people. It would never be a game that I liked. I don't even know if I would rate it a 7 if it was just on me, but it's on that carryover and the fun I've had with others, that it really deserves the rating it's got. Anyway, up this goes. And by the way, that same fun with others probably could have been had with the Avalon Hill Classics if I was of that era. I mean, I've come close to that with Africa Core, and I've seen some of those games, and say my ex-wife kind of enjoyed some of them in a way that I could see that if that had been one of just a few games that I had, like this was at one point, then it would have been kind of one of the go-to, you know, that I wouldn't mind pulling out once a year or once every couple of years or something. And I don't mean, I never had that few a number of games that, like, you know, that, we're not talking that kind of number. So, well, in my adult life. So, you know, those might hold a fonder place in my heart, but the way this does. But I really kind of rank this in with them. It's the same kind of thinking and the same kind of strategy with maybe a few less pieces. One thing that's kind of cool about the few less pieces, when I look at like the Victory Point games that come with like 20 pieces or something, that just doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to play Austerlitz with 20 pieces, but I don't mind playing Robin Hood with 20 pieces, right? All right, I've been chattering too much.